Welcome to Moving Mountains with Brittany. Today we have a special guest with Frankie.
Hello. This is my first time on a podcast. I'm not sure what to say. As Brittany said, I'm Frank. I'm currently attending a church, and I've been a Christian my whole life. So really, I grew up in a Christian household, and I can only thank God for that, because I've seen how my life has been affected by it in comparison to others. For example, I've seen how some of the biggest choices I make, I always tend to go back to God, or I consult God about it, and I can only thank my parents for that, because they really, as I said, they really took me to church, and they taught me, about Jesus Christ, and they would also read the Bible with us as well, and so I think that really had a big impact on me, and yeah, I mean that's pretty much it.
So you grew up in a Christian household.
Yes.
Was there ever a point in time where you were like, man, I don't need this? Like, you never had like that rebellious stage where you were sort of questioning things? Did that ever happen to you?
No, yeah. So, uh, there was a lot of that actually where it wasn't really questioning because I feel like thankfully, we're in this day and age where we have a lot of resources where we do have questions.
Yeah.
We could just search it up, like let's say the existence of God. We could literally just search it up, and there's a lot of articles or videos that you could go through and listen to and watch. And then basically, as a Christian, what really helped me out as a Christian was actually watching those videos or watching podcasts and how they would dissect the Bible in a way and kind of see where the Bible came from, how it was made, how the books of the Bible were put together. So just doing research on things like that, it really made my faith grow a lot more, in the Bible. Yeah, so that's why I'm so Christian today,
Yeah.
because I know there's a lot of atheists out there who already are not that well educated, and they just think that, oh well, the Bible is just was written by some dude,
Yeah.
party he was high on something and he
Yeah.
probably put the Bible together. But no, obviously there's a lot more to it,
Yeah.
and it takes hours and hours of those people who did the research, on the manuscripts and stuff like that, who were like, oh no, like this is where the Bible came from, so there's actual sources that you could trace the Bible back to.
I have a question for you. Do you remember the time when you fully gave yourself to God?
That is a very good question. The only time for me was probably, I want to say either middle school or high school, really.
Wow. Mhm.
So around there where, again, I've been a Christian my whole life,
Yeah.
but I feel like, again, to add to your question,
Yeah.
I feel like there's always that one step where you're like, okay, now I'm definitely for sure a Christian. And I think for me it was, yeah, like middle school, high school, because honestly, there were times where I don't know if this is like depression or what I would feel, but I would just feel very alone, to be honest. And I would just get sad randomly. So I would have these random episodes of getting sad. And I think even my mom remembers this because I remember one day, and this happened in elementary, where I would literally just go up to her and I would say, hey, look, like, mom, I'm sad. Like, I don't know why I'm sad, but I'm just sad, And so I feel like it was that aspect of me praying to God. I'm like, hey, look, like, I don't know why I'm feeling this way, but, just help me feel better. Help me feel your presence, And so, and then ever since that, yeah, I've always felt God there, even as I was alone, even as I was struggling through those things, like I could definitely know that he was there and I could feel that he was there.
Oh, I don't know. Middle school's like a really hard time for a lot of people. I know a
Yeah.
lot, like that's kind of when I was like, I think just puberty, you're figuring yourself out, you're learning all your emotions, you feel things for the first time. It's definitely a weird and powerful time.
Yeah, yeah, it is. I feel like that kind of added to it too, where it's just a weird time and people are like exploring themselves and also they're exploring how to interact with each other too.
Did you know that in the Bible, it doesn't talk about like, like a youth age? You're just kind of like boy and then man. There is no sort of like in between.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's no like in between phase like we have now where you're like, okay, you're a teenager, now you're a young adult, now you're an adult. No, it's just straight boy to man, which is kind of like mind opening to me.
Oh, wow.
Something I'm struggling with personally because like I still feel like a little kid, but then I'm 21 years old and I don't know how to behave or how I'm supposed to behave or what I'm supposed to do now.
Oh, yeah, I get you, man. Like, I feel like there are times where, even myself too, where I kind of question myself, where I'm like, hey, should I be doing certain things differently? Like, is there something wrong? I just really think that hey, look, if we're seeking God more, and if you genuinely want to improve, on yourself and also your relationship with God, I think that's all you really need to do. At the end of the day, is just to really seek God, and then He'll also give you that wisdom and that maturity to navigate through life.
Amen. Yeah, no, it's like you said, God would give you that wisdom, and sort of when I started looking into it, it was a lot of like men take action and they go to God no matter what they're going through. They don't go to God, feel good, and then just struggle and give up. No, it's they keep going. Once they struggle, they go to God. Something like that. Still learning.
Yeah, but honestly, I can relate a lot to that too, because there are times where you just feel like down in the dumps,
Yeah.
and it's like nothing could make you happy.
Mhm.
And I've been through those days where it's like, damn, I'm really depressed. The thing that does put my spirits up and that cheers me up is always God.
Yeah.
Every time I pray to Him, I just basically kind of I'm not sure how to say this word in English. Me desahogo.
You release yourself?
So I kind of release myself, and in the form of prayer, right?
Mhm.
So I go into, as the Bible describes it, into your secret spot, right?
Mhm.
Your secret place, and that's where I kind of just pray everything to God. I kind of release everything, all the luggage I have onto Him, and instantly after that prayer, I just feel instantly better.
Yeah. It's so sad that there's a lot of people who never like have that feeling
Yeah.
because they just see God as this like empty bucket person, someone who's really mean, that they'll never open up and have an opportunity to just like you can literally open up whenever you want. There's no rules, right? You can literally just go to your room, go to the bathroom, do whatever you got to do, and then just pray and release everything you're struggling with.
I think people struggle with that because of the Old Testament. You would see in the Old Testament how God would tell Saul, "Oh, I need you to kill like this nation, and no one can survive, not even the animals. I want everything gone." And I feel like that's people struggle with, seeing that God is a good person. And I think there was a time where I was talking to Katie, and she was like, "Oh, I like Jesus, but not God, because God's mean and harsh, and Jesus is more loving and kind." And I think that's why people are like, "Oh, he's very judgmental. He's not loving." You guys have any thoughts regarding that?
Okay. Well, I was just gonna say the reason why people think that there's like two different gods in the Bible
Yeah.
is because I'll admit the God in the Old Testament, yeah, he's very harsh, yeah, and he always releases a judgment. But I think the reason why that is because keep in mind that there's no atonement for sin. So
Yeah.
there's no Jesus Christ, right? Jesus Christ isn't there, right? And I feel like that's the one thing that people miss, is that the reason why the Old Testament things were a lot tougher is because God is a wise God, and he's also all good, right? So anytime something evil comes, that evil has to get punished. And so that's why in the Old Testament, God seems a lot harsher, because there's no Jesus Christ, because there's no one to defend the people of Israel. Like, hey, like I am the mediator.
Yeah.
Like I am the one who's gonna step in between them, and I'm gonna fight for you guys. Like I'm gonna beat it. Yeah, but basically that kind of points that look like that. That's why it seems like there's two different gods
Yeah.
in the Bible, where the Old Testament there's no it really seems like there's no mercy because of God and his people. They're always sinning against them, and then that sin always has to get punished at the end of the day.
But you're right. Like without that's what happens. So that's what happens when there's no Jesus. So does that mean when we pass away and we face judgment, is it going to be that strict and harsh?
No, because it talks in the Bible that Jesus is your judge.
Jesus is our judge.
Yeah, or your lawyer.
Yeah. So, wait, your question was
When we die, is our judgment day going to be as harsh as it was in the Old Testament?
no.
No, it's gonna look.
I think at the end of the day, everyone does get judged by Jesus at the end of the day, because even back in the Old Testament, they would still make sacrifices, and that was always alluding to the sacrifice that God was going to make with Jesus Christ. So there was always references, and God was always kind of hinting at that, like, hey, look, like this is what you guys are doing is just temporary. Like there's going to be someone else who's going to take that place and make that sacrifice for you guys.
So there's gonna be like a major sacrifice, so you never have to do this or feel like this again.
Yeah, exactly. And then obviously, I just think that people in the Old Testament, they might just get judged differently, because as I said before, God is a just God. Yeah. So I'm assuming he's gonna understand, like, hey, look, these guys, all they had was the law. So obviously they're all gonna get judged differently. And this is all assumptions too, which this is not biblical. So I'll just say that, but it's all assumptions. And that's just my assumption that I think that they're probably gonna get judged differently.
Well, of course, yeah. Well, I think him being a just God is biblical. Yeah. So I think you're right, and I like because obviously he's not gonna base upon like you're not clean or there was no Jesus, so he knows what he's doing, right?
Exactly. Yeah. How you said, he knows exactly what he's doing. Yeah. First of all, I want to give credit where credit's due, because then where I got the idea from this was a debate that I watched called the two people debating was David Wood and Alex O'Connor. So if you guys have time to watch that, I recommend watching it. It's a really good debate. So
they have really cool names.
Yeah, they do.
David Woods, Alex O'Connor, dude. Sounds like a UFC fight.
Yeah, and it was a really interesting debate, and this is where I got the whole two powers in heaven idea.
Oh, wow.
Right? And so David Wood, he was a Christian. Mm-hmm. You know, they were arguing, basically the main arguing that they were arguing about was what did Jesus Christ claim to be God? And I already like David Wood's response, because he didn't give your typical John passages, you know, like your passages in John where Jesus clearly claims, like when he says, I am the Father of one, things like that.
Before Abraham was, I am, or something like that.
So what he does is he brings up this whole two powers in heaven idea, right? And he kind of correlates that with Jesus Christ, because later in the New Testament, Jesus Christ comes in and he says that he was one of those two powers in heaven. But I think we'll go ahead and get into that because there's a lot more to it.
Okay.
But so two powers in heaven. So this idea actually started as a Jewish idea, because there's these Jewish scholars who would see that it seems like there is like two lords speaking in the Old Testament. And they noticed this. They're like, okay, like, why is there two lords? Like, that doesn't really make sense, right? And so it started as a Jewish idea, but they later disregarded it. They declared it as a heresy. And I think as we investigate further, we're going to find out why. You know, why they started disregarding it. But the first example is in Genesis, chapter 19, verse 24.
So 19:24. I'll read it.
Yeah, you could read it. Yeah, go for it.
Where the Bible is read in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, it says, Then out of the sky the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah, burning sulfur from the Lord. He demolished these cities, the entire plain, all the inhabitants of the cities, and whatever grew on the ground. But Lot's wife looked back and became a pillar of salt.
Yeah, I didn't realize. I think you're reading a different version. I thought there was more to the verse, because then in my version it says, "The Lord rained brimstone and the fire on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heaven."
Oh, yeah. It says out of the sky of the Lord. Yeah. So you just kind of flipped it around. Interesting.
Yeah, but the main point here is that we see that the first Lord rained down brimstone, right? So it says the Lord rained down brimstone and fire, and then a little after that we see from the Lord out of the heavens, right? So it's kind of saying, and the Lord rained down fire from the Lord out of the heavens, right? So I guess the question is, why not just say, and the Lord rained down fire from out of the heavens? Why specifically repeat the word Lord again, right? Mm-hmm. So it seems like there's two lords here, and this again happens in Zechariah chapter 2.
Gotta go on the table of contents for this one.
That's all right. It's all right. We're all learning. It says, "For this is what the Lord Almighty says." Keep in mind, this is the Lord speaking, right? Mm-hmm. So this is the Lord speaking.
Wait, this is Jesus speaking or the Lord? Who's speaking?
Well, it just says the Lord.
The Lord is speaking.
Yeah, the Lord, or aka God, you know. So aka the Lord Almighty says, after the glorious one has sent me, right? So the Lord is saying that the glorious one sent him. It's like, but I thought there was just one Lord, right? So who is this glorious one that he's talking about, right? So again, it seems like there's two lords here, two different higher powers here in heaven. And so let's continue reading. Can you read, or I think I'll read verses 9 and 10. So it says, "I will surely raise my hand against them, so that their slaves will plunder them. Then you will know that the Lord Almighty has sent me." Again, this is the Lord speaking, right? And then it says, verse 10, "Shout and be glad, daughter Zion, for I am coming, and I will live among you, declares the Lord."
Wait, this is before the New Testament, right? So is this basically like Jesus telling them that he's coming?
So before the New Testament, so Jesus isn't revealed to us yet.
Well, he's not revealed to us yet, but it's talking about the Lord of armies has sent me. I am coming to dwell among you. Though that's Jesus.
Yeah, it almost seems so. Basically, after this is the point where I'm getting at, is that in the Old Testament, there seems to be two lords. One Lord you can interact with and talk to, and the Lord you cannot talk to, or no human being could talk to. So again, this Lord that I think he's talking about, you can talk to, and you can interact with. And then again, it says, verse 11, many nations will be joined with the Lord in that day and will become my people. Again, it sounds very similar if we read it, you know. I will live among you and you will know that the Lord Almighty has sent me to you. So, and then that's the end of that example, right? But again, we see this thing where it seems like there's two lords.
What's the context of this sort of story? What's going on here?
For this story?
Yeah, like just chapter 2.
I think this is just a prophet, because I know Zechariah was a prophet.
Okay.
So I think he's just a prophet preaching to these people right now, right? But I'm not sure, to be honest with you, I'm not too sure the exact context, but I know it is a prophet speaking to them.
And who is Zion? I feel like I see that name everywhere throughout the Bible.
Isn't that a place?
Yeah, so Zion.
I think they also mention it in Revelations, no?
Yeah, I believe it is I think it's a place of worship, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Because I think it relates to the whole mountain Zion. I believe I'm not.
Mount Zion?
Yeah, Mount Zion. Yeah, Mount Zion.
Yeah.
And that's where they worship.
I have a question on a certain book after this that kind of relates to this like multi-higher power thing. So, yeah.
What's your question?
So in the book of Matthew, it talks about Jesus was like talking to these two guys that had already died. I don't know what's going on there.
Wait, what happened?
Oh, I'll pull it up when.
Oh, are you talking about the transfiguration of Jesus Christ?
I don't think that's what it is. Yeah, you're right. It is a transfiguration. Moses and Elijah appear to them.
Moses and Elijah?
Yeah.
So for that, man, like, all I can say is that I don't know for sure.
Valid.
But there's a lot of speculation.
Okay.
And the speculation that I personally think is that he's talking to them in that time period. And let me explain. Because there are times when in the book, I think it's in the book of Exodus, where Moses said that he saw God, right? And that he saw God. And I'm not sure if he talked to him, but I think he did. Well, what you're reading here in Matthew, that's exactly what that is, right? Is that he's manifesting himself to Moses. And for Elijah, well, it's also the same case for Elijah as well, where he's manifesting himself to Elijah when he was still alive, right? In that time period.
I'm confused. You say manifesting himself, so he's like talking to he's talking to them now from the past, or like what do you?
How would I explain this? So you also kind of have to take into consideration that God is spiritual, and then since Jesus also has divinity, he's also a spiritual being in a sense as well. Yes, he has a human body, but he's also spiritual as well. Yeah. So I think that in a spiritual sense, time doesn't exist. So technically for Jesus, I think that's exactly what he did. He just manifested himself to both Moses and Elijah, right? Kind of in a way, time travel. He manifested himself to them, and that's where the disciples saw, the two other people. Yeah, so it just, I mean, if only you were a disciple at that time, you could only imagine, like you just see Jesus floating up, and all of a sudden you see these two other people.
Heck no, bro. You see some dude floating, and then the next day you get skinned alive for claiming it? That's like a wild time.
Yeah, bro. But yeah, I just think that being a disciple at that time is crazy, man. Like, imagine. You just see Jesus doing all these things like that, and this guy's floating, shining,
You're like, hey, yo, where'd you get this wine from, bro?
That's crazy, man. And that whole resurrection too, where they literally got put to death because they saw him, resurrected. They were all saying, yes, I saw Jesus Christ. He did live again, and they all got put to death for that.
Dude, I saw like a video about that. I didn't know how they died. I did one of them got cooked with oil. The other one got skinned alive. The other one got crucified upside down.
That's Peter, no? It's crucified upside down, yeah.
And then another one got like beheaded, and this is all just, dang, man. You want to hop back into your idea?
Yeah, we could go ahead and hop back in here.
Yeah, sorry, I just had a question about Matthew.
Oh, unless you have another question.
No, just hop in.
Okay, but yeah, so yeah, here it seems that there's two different lords, right? And this is where it kind of gets pretty interesting too, because in the book of Judges, chapter 6, and that's going to be verses 11 through 14.
I'm going back to the table of contents over here. You're pulling out all these books, Frankie. Books I never opened before. Angel of the Lord came, and he sat under the oak that was in Oprah, which belonged to Joash the Abizrite. His son Gideon was threshing wheat in the winepress in order to hide it from the Midianites. Then the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, "The Lord is with you, valiant warrior." Gideon said to him, "Please, my Lord, if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened? And where are all his wonders that our fathers told us about?" They said, "Hasn't the Lord brought us out of Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and handed us over to the Midian."
Okay, let's pause there. So, here we get introduced to the idea of the angel of the Lord, right? This is also referenced back in the book of Exodus, because I think it says that the angel of the Lord, when he talked to Moses, when God talked to Moses, it says that the angel of the Lord went inside the bush, something across those lines. And then a few verses after that, it says that the Lord was speaking. And then it's like, wait a minute, I thought it was the angel of the Lord, not the Lord himself, right? So why is it saying that the Lord is speaking now? And here we have a similar instance where I think even Gideon says, he even calls the angel of the Lord, "Oh, my Lord, if the Lord is with us." It's like, why would he call him, Lord?
Yeah.
Right? And then, so verse 14 as well. Can you read verse 14?
Yes, I can. The Lord turned to him and said, "Go in the strength you have and deliver Israel from the grasp of Midian. I am sending you."
So again, keep in mind, he was speaking to the angel of the Lord, right?
Yeah.
But then in verse 14, it says, the Lord turned to him, right? And said the following, "Go in this might of yours, and you shall save Israel from the hand of the Midianites. Have I not sent you?" Right? So again, we here have this instance of, it's the angel of the Lord speaking, but then it switches to the Lord turned to him and spoke.
So is angel of the Lord, Lord of the armies, are they part of, is like angel of the Lord and the Holy Spirit, Lord of the armies, Jesus, and then the other one's God? And or is it just kind of like, what's going on here?
I think it is a trinity, but they're all just given different names. They're all just given different names, like the angel of the Lord. It seems like the angel of the Lord is, as I said before, a Lord that you can talk to and you can actually interact with, right? Because later in verses 22 and 23, it says, "Now Gideon perceived that he was the angel of the Lord. So Gideon says, 'Alas, O Lord God, for I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face.' Then the Lord said to him, 'Peace be with you. Do not fear. You shall not die.'" Right? So again, he's speaking to the angel of the Lord. And then in verse 23, it says, "Then the Lord said to him, 'Peace be with you. Do not fear. You shall not die.'" So the angel of the Lord is basically telling them, like, hey, look, like, you're not going to die. So in other words, saying, or kind of proving that this Lord you can actually interact with, right? Because I think in other verses it says that no one can see the face of the Lord, right? Because of his glory.
Yeah, I think God said that to Moses and back in Exodus, huh?
Yeah, because of his glory, like no one can see him. Yeah. But it turns out that this specific Lord you can interact with, right? It seems like you're not going to die if you do talk to him or if you see him.
That's funny because that was my question. Like, if he saw the angel of the Lord, isn't he gonna die? And then the next verse was like, "You shall not die."
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And then to kind of set things in stone here, this is where we kind of connect everything together. It's going to be in Daniel chapter 7, verses 9 through 14. This is going to be a bit long, quite a few verses.
Okay. Whoa.
It's quite a bit. It's quite a bit, bro. Yeah. But we'll break it down.
Sweet, man. Let's do it.
I don't know if you guys want to read or do you guys want me to read?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, just read verse 9 for now.
Okay. While I looked, people put some thrones in their places. Then God, who has ruled forever, sat on his throne. His clothes were white as snow, his hair as white, like pure wool. His throne and the wheels under it burned with flames of fire.
Okay, so right away here, verse 9, it says, "I watched till thrones," emphasis on plural, right? But I thought that God was a God who doesn't share his glory, so why would there be multiple thrones? Right? So that's a question there. Why would there be multiple thrones? Right? So again, another emphasis on there seems to be multiple lords here. So can you continue verse 10?
Wait, does this mean that right now Daniel is seeing?
Yeah, Daniel is prophesizing.
Oh, prophesizing.
Yeah, so he's kind of seeing what's gonna happen.
Oh, in the future? Oh, okay.
In your guys' Bibles, does it say Ancient of Days?
Yes, that's what it says on mine. Does it say that for you?
I don't. For verse 9?
It says the Ancient of Days took his seat.
No.
No. What does yours say?
Well, I looked, people put some thrones in their places, then God, who has ruled forever, sat on his throne.
Okay. Yeah, so I think the Ancient of Days, yeah, it's just pretty much God. Another name for God.
Okay, 10. A river of fire poured out from the place where he was sitting. Thousands of servants were ready to do whatever he wanted. Many more thousands stood around, ready to serve him. Then the meeting of the court began. Someone opened the books to see what was in them. Do I read 11?
Yeah, you could read 11 or you know what, we could just skip to verse 13.
I continued to watch my vision at night, and this is what I saw. I saw someone who seemed like a son of man. He was coming towards me. With the clouds of the sky around him, he came near to God, who has ruled forever. People took him to stand in front of God. That's 13. Should I read 14 as well?
Is Daniel the one that could see things?
He was the one who saw visions.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, so, and then here it says we get to see two different people, right? So the Son of Man and the Ancient of Days, which is God. And it says that they brought him near before him. So they brought the Son of Man near before the Ancient of Days. And then verse 14 says who the Son of Man is, which is, you guys probably already know who that is. So you can continue reading. Yeah, so you can read verse 14 now.
Okay. God gave him great honor and authority to rule as king. The people of all nations and those who spoke every language agreed to serve him. He has authority to rule forever. He will never stop being king. Nobody will be able to destroy his kingdom.
Yeah, right. So again, Son of Man and Ancient of Days. And it says that the Son of Man is again going to give, or has given, or God has given him all dominion and all glory in the kingdom, and all peoples, nations, and languages will serve him. His dominion is everlasting, and it shall not pass. Right? So now let's move on to the Old Testament. And let's go to Mark 14. Mark chapter 14, verses 61 to 64. And so here we see everything connect together. And Jesus flat out says who he is right here in these verses.
Can I just read them all?
Yeah, you can read them all. Yeah, go for it.
But he kept silent and did not answer. Again, the high priest questioned him, "Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?" "I am," said Jesus, "and you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven."
Sounds familiar, huh, John?
Yeah. Wow.
So yeah, continue reading.
Then the high priest tore his robes and said, "Why do we still need witnesses? You have heard the blasphemy. What is your decision?" They all condemned him as deserving death.
So because the Jewish people knew exactly what Jesus was saying, he was basically saying that he's God, pretty much. That him and God are equal. Because they know who the Son of Man is. They know that God gives the Son of Man all authority and all dominion over everything. So that's why it says in verse 64, you have heard blasphemy. What do you think? And they all condemned him to be deserving of death. So this is where everything kind of comes together. And then also another verse, if you guys want to go to it, it's in Mark 12, 35 through 37.
Do you think that the Jewish leaders at that time did not want to acknowledge Jesus because they didn't want their time to be up as rulers?
No, I just think that for the Jewish people, they probably thought that the Messiah was someone who was going to come with power and that was going to free the people of Israel. Because keep in mind, they were under the Roman leadership or the Roman Empire. So they probably thought that he was going to free them from the Romans. But as Jesus said, he wasn't there to change the governments of the world. He was there to give them spiritual renewal. Not to change things on the earthly side of things, but to change things on the spiritual side of things. And I feel like that's what they didn't see.
Yeah, I mean, but they would see all these miracles and you would think that they would turn around and be like, hey, maybe he is the Messiah.
Yeah, that's just crazy to think about. Because, there's people who, you don't even have to go that far. Judas himself, he was there with Jesus most of the time, and he saw Jesus do all these miracles, and he still betrayed him. So you don't even have to go, go that far and look into his enemies. Even his own followers betrayed him too.
And do you think whenever we sin, we become more like Judas?
Well, I just think that there's two different ways we could look at it. Because or I don't know if you were there in my preaching, but I kind of touched the subject a bit. Where basically we could either be like Peter, or we could either be like Judas when we sin.
Yeah.
See, because Judas, what he did was that he was overcome with guilt, and he knew exactly what he did, right? He betrayed Jesus and he just killed himself.
Yeah.
So he just couldn't deal with it. But versus Peter over here, he also technically betrayed Jesus. He denied him, because he asked him, they're like, "Oh, you're one of his disciples, aren't you?" And then he was like, "No, I don't know him."
Nope. 3 times.
Yeah.
It's because we saw a clip yesterday together.
Yeah, that was exactly the clip where they all asked him. They're like, "Hey, I recognize you. Like, aren't you the guy following him?" And he's like, "No, I never met him." And they asked him 3 times, and he said all 3 times, "No, I never met him. I never met him." But the difference with Peter is that he actually got forgiveness of the Lord, and the reason being is because he so loved Jesus. He so was able to go back to Jesus Christ, and that's literally what happened. Jesus Christ asked him after Jesus Christ resurrected. He went to Peter and he asked him, like, "Peter, do you love me?" And he asked him 3 times, "Peter, do you love me? Peter, do you love me?" Right? And Peter, all those 3 times, he was like, "Yes, Lord." And at the last time, it says that Peter wept, right? Because he knew exactly who he was referring to.
Yeah.
Yeah, it says that Peter wept then. And there's other things to those verses too. But I think that's a discussion for another day though. But
You know what I like about what you just shared? That you acknowledge that we were gonna sin. Because that's true. We're sinners. We're born sinners. We're gonna sin. We're gonna fall into sin all the time. But just because we sin doesn't make us bad people. It's how we respond to it. And I really like what you said about that. Because there's no way we're ever gonna be perfect. And when we try to be perfect, that's when we take God out of the picture. Because there's no way we're gonna be perfect. If you try to be perfect, you take God out of the picture, you just open the door to the enemy to deceive you. So I really like that you said we have a way to choose how we react.
Yeah, because then I feel like a lot of people focus on what am I gonna do if I sin, when the question is, what are you gonna do when you sin? Because we're all gonna sin. There's no getting around it. We're all sinners and we're all gonna fall eventually. So I think the better question is, what do we do when we sin? Do we go back to Jesus Christ? Do we pray about it? Or are we like, you know what, I already sinned, I'll just do it one more time, or I'll go even deeper into it.
Yeah.
I think just sometimes there's just so much, like you said, there's guilt. Like I know for me, one thing I struggle with is eating a lot. And it's like, I ate too much. I already ate a lot. Might as well just keep eating, But that's like you said, that's guilt. You're letting guilt overwhelm you when you're not going back to God. You're just going deeper into your sin, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah, it's crazy. Guilt it gets to us all.
It comes to lie and deceive, man.
But it's also I feel like it's also really from the devil too, because there are times where the devil or the deceiver, really, that's exactly what he does. He tries to tell you things that aren't true. He tries to tell you things to unmotivate you. So he kind of tells you, "Hey, look, but you can't do this, if you just sin, Like, why are you going to read your Bible if you just barely sin right now? Or like, why are you going to pray?
Yeah.
Like, if you just sin, like, you're not holy at all." So he starts filling thoughts in your head, that aren't true. And all you need to say is, "You know what, Jesus, I know I messed up, but you already paid the price for my sin. You already paid for the price of sin."
And do you think just praying like that would help just getting the devil out of your head?
Yeah, I think if it's genuine, yeah, I think I feel like that always works.
I think right there what you said though, if it's genuine, even that is like space for the enemy to hop in. Because then you pray and you're like, was this genuine? And then the enemy's like, that wasn't genuine. Don't lie. That wasn't genuine. You don't feel bad. You're just saying that. Because I know for me, whenever I go up to the altar or whenever I'm speaking during your youth service or hosting or doing anything, it's just like, I don't deserve to be up there. I'm a dirty guy, man. I'm a terrible person. Why am I up there? And the enemy's just like, yeah, don't go, man. Just don't go. You don't deserve to be up there. And it's hard.
Yeah, man. And honestly, I feel like the the enemy is always gonna try doing that, man. And I feel like when the enemy does that, he knows what you're about to do, and he knows exactly what your purpose is. When you go up there, and so I feel like that's part of the reason why he always tries to put things in our head, or he tries to remind us of things that we did. But it's like, hey, look, like Jesus already paid the price for all of it.
Yeah.
Like Jesus already covered our sin.
Don't even talk to me, homie. God got it covered for me. Talk to my lawyer.
Exactly. Yeah. But you also brought up an interesting point, the whole guilt, or the whole, not the guilt part, but the whole of not being genuine.
Yeah.
And I would admit I also had those thoughts too, where it feels like I'm not being genuine. But I just think that something that has helped me out a lot is to be like, you know what, God, like, just to solely focus on Jesus Christ. Yeah, I think the only thing I could say is like really meditate in it, or pray in it. If you're having second thoughts about that, just really meditate and be like, you know what, God, like, yeah, I messed up, and just trying your best to improve.
Not be perfect, but just be better.
Yeah, not being perfect. But yeah, trying your best to be better, because there's also a difference too. Because I feel like there's people where I actually told the youth this too, where like I told them like, hey, if you guys ever get tempted, or if you guys ever fall into sin, you guys kind of have to ask yourself these questions. The first question is, what was I doing, right? Or what was I looking at? Or what was I thinking about? So kind of those three questions: what was I doing? What was I looking at? Or what was I thinking about?
Yeah.
Right? And the answers to those questions, that'll help you so you don't do it again. So you don't fall into temptation, or you don't get tempted again. And that could also be used in a good sense too. Like, let's say you had a good day, or you did something good and productive. Well, you just ask yourself, okay, what did I do? What was I looking at? And what was I thinking to get me to this good place where I'm at? And then you just do it again. So it could be used on both sides of the spectrum.
I like that too. I feel like knowing the cues and where they come from is very powerful. I did have a question when we were talking about like, just praying. I think there was a couple of people who told me that there's going to be some prayers that God rejects. And I feel like I don't know why. I don't know why he would do that, why he would reject our prayers. And whenever I sin, and feel guilty, I feel like God's not going to listen to my prayer because I just sinned. Whether if it was a small sin or a big sin, I just feel like that. It doesn't really matter.
I'll just say this, Brittany. Jesus puts it plainly too, where he says, just seek and you shall find. So if you're seeking him, if you're praying to him, and if you're worshiping him, I think that's also something that helps too, is really worshiping him, recognizing that, hey, look, God, like, you're the God of the universe, and I'm just some speck of dirt.
Yeah.
That's all I am. And it also kind of reminds me of the story of Job too. Because Job, he was kind of demanding all these things, or he was also questioning God.
Yeah.
Right? And then God basically answers back with, like, who are you to speak these things to me? Like, were you there at the beginning when I fashioned the whole universe? Like, that's literally how he responds. Like, were you there? Yeah. That's literally how he responds. Like, were you there at the beginning of the universe? How I made everything? Like, do you know who I am? Kind of putting him in his place,
Yeah.
Like, hey, like, do you know who are you speaking to? So I think that's also one thing that we also have to take into consideration. We have to take into consideration the God that we're speaking to, the God that we're worshiping, and be like, you know what, God, I'm just a speck, and I'm a sinful person, but I know that's the reason why you sent down your son. And so for right now, I just want to give you all the glory for doing that in my life.
What's the context for God rejects some of your prayers? Is that like me asking for $1 million? Or is that like me asking him, Lord, I feel stressed right now, please help me? What's sort of the context?
I think it was my mentor. She was saying that if you have if you're mad at somebody or you have problems with somebody, God's not going to listen to your prayer. He just wants you to make up with that person.
Well, I think there's something like that in the Bible where it says like, don't go to the altar if you have. I'm using young people terms. Don't go to the altar if you have beef with somebody.
Yeah, so it actually says that for when you're taking the down. I was about to say communion, but there's another word for it. Yeah, the Eucharist, and also the communion too. Where it basically says it for that, where it's saying that if you have a problem, or if you have like hatred towards someone else, that you shouldn't take it, And so that I do believe too, where I think that if you haven't forgiven, a certain person, like in your heart or also physically too, then yeah, I don't think God is gonna be willing to, respond to your prayer or work with you, because it's through forgiveness while you're here, while you're saved.
Yeah.
So it's like, why wouldn't you forgive your neighbor?
Yeah.
So I do agree with that. Yeah. So you do need to forgive.
We were talking about the story of Job. Yeah. Hope or Hope. We were talking about the story of Hope, and I've read the story a couple of times, and
can you give a quick one-sentence summary for those who might not be familiar with that story?
For the book of Job. So Job was a man who worshipped and honored God, and every day he would give sacrifices to the Lord.
Was he the rich guy who the enemy was like, can I? It was like, it's for me. It was for me. It was just the rich guy who the enemy was like, can I like distract him? And God was like, go ahead, but he made rules.
Yeah. So my question is, how come he never talked to Job? Hey, I'm here with you. It's okay. Why did he always talk to the enemy but never to Job and encouraging him? Yeah. Keep going. You got this. I'm here with you. He felt abandoned, but God never talked to him.
You know what I also don't like about the story? The fact that he murdered Job's entire family, and then was like, "Okay, you're okay. You have faith in me. Let me multiply it." Then it kind of shows like there is no joy in just 2 kids. You gotta have 4 kids, and that means you're happier. I feel like
you want to know what it is too. I think you just had a very good point, because it seems like, yeah, he's not talking to Job, but I think and again, this isn't a popular theory, or at least this isn't the way that Job was taught to me. And because there's this one YouTube video where I watched where he explains the book of Job, but in a different sense, where he just pretty much says that Job, he just knew, not that he knew God, but he only heard of God. And yes, he would make sacrifices to him, but he never had that personal connection with God. Because if we go to the start of Job,
bro's cooking. Job is so funny to me.
There's a theory that maybe Job is older than Abraham.
There's also a theory that Job was just a story and not an actual like event that happened.
So that's also another one too, is that a lot of Christians don't know if it was an actual story, or or if it was an actual event or just a story. That's something that a lot of Christians speculate, or there's some heavy debate on that. They don't know if it's a story just so that we could learn from, or if it actually happened. But here right away in verse 1, it says that there is a man, right, in the line of whose name was Job, and that man was blameless and upright, right? So that's the part I want to focus on. That man was blameless and upright, and who feared God and shunned evil, right? Keep in mind that Job he feared the Lord, right? And he shunned evil. Yes. So now let's go to how it describes Noah. So let's go to Genesis chapter 6, verse 9. So Genesis chapter 6, verse 9.
Amen. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among his contemporaries. Noah walked with God.
Exactly. So 2 different sentences here. It says Job feared God, but Noah walked with God. So that already within itself is a good question. How come with Noah it says that he walked with him, and Job it says that he just feared him, right? And so that leads to the whole speculation that Job didn't really know who God was. He only heard of God. That's why it says that he only feared him, because he heard all these stories of God punishing and doing all these things. Amen. Right? So he just feared him and he shunned evil. But here it says Noah walked with God. So that leads to the whole theory that that's maybe why God never spoke to him.
Because he didn't know his voice.
Yeah, he didn't know his voice, or maybe that he wanted to teach him something. Because at the end of Job, it says that, I don't know what chapter, but towards the end of Job, it says that Job stated, "Now I know who you are, God." They're speaking to God, obviously. He's like, "Now I know who you are."
Dude, this is touching because, growing up, I feared God. I knew of him. I knew the stories. I knew about him, but I didn't walk with God like I do now. I don't know him the way I know him now. Now, like the relationship that I have now. And so this theory is very, very relatable, and I think it's a pretty valid point. There's a big difference between fearing someone, fearing God, and then walking with him. Gave me goosebumps, man.
Yeah, that was an interesting theory, because I was never taught Job in that aspect, of that. Maybe Job never knew who God really was. That's why he just feared him, and that's why it says that he just made sacrifices because he just wanted to be on the right terms with God. Like, I'll just do this to keep God satisfied. But we know that that's not how God works. He wants to have a relationship with us.
Yeah.
So in a way, that's what he was also teaching Job, that like, hey, look, it's not just fearing me that's gonna help you out here. It's actually wanting to build a relationship with me that's gonna help you get through these things. That's really interesting.
That is very crazy. So why did God kill Job's children?
I just think,
were they that evil that God was like, no, I don't want them to be here anymore? Because like, God is loving, and why would He be like, you know what, Jonathan, I don't want you in my life anymore?
yes,
Bam.
yeah, this is the Old Testament.
This is Old Testament.
Yeah, but I think God, because the reason why, because they were sinning. Because in John chapter 1, it says that right away that Job would make sacrifices for him and his family. So his family, where they party, didn't even know who God was either. Well, for sure they didn't know who God was. So they probably didn't even think about him, to be honest. All Job was doing was like, hey, so I could keep the Lord satisfied, I'll just make sacrifices to him. So maybe that's why he's like, you know what? Since I see that Job here is kind of like, he's still, I think God saw the opportunity with Job to teach him a lesson and to kind of show him and to kind of have mercy on him, because he knew he knew that he has heard about him, but he just genuinely wanted to show him who he was. So I think that's why he decided to put him through this test.
I think the story also shows that God knows our limits and He has our back.
Yeah.
He has power over Satan, that He gave Satan rules, and Satan obeyed His rules. And then throughout each trial, God would tell Satan, like, tempt him, putting him to these challenges, but don't do this. He knew Job's limits. And I feel like He knows our limits whenever we're faced with like temptation or sin. He knows how much we can handle, and He's always going to be there for us whenever we need Him.
I think Brian once said that He knows how much you can handle, but He will always give you more to show you that who He is.
True, because if we never fall, if we never fail, then there would be no need for God.
And I think in a way that's what happened to Job here. He kind of gave him the worst day of his life, by taking everything away.
Was this a day? I thought it was like months and months, because he was sick, no?
I think it would party happened very quick. I won't say it wasn't a day, but it happened very quick, all these things.
Oh, I know everyone died in like a few, like around the same time, but I thought he was like sick for an extended period of time.
No, I don't think so. I think it was like every day there was maybe it was a month, because every day it was a different trial. One day he lost everything and his wife cursed him, and then the other day he got like a skin disease and his friends came trying to help him, and then his friends just,
bro, you're silly. Why do you worship this God?
Yeah. Well, that's also another thing too, man, is that his friends too. I think towards the end of the story, God wanted to punish his friends for calling out Job, for basically making fun of him, essentially. And thanks to Job, God actually spared him, because Job was like, hey, like, have mercy on them,
Really?
And so, yeah. So he technically saved his friends, from getting punished.
Does that mean we have power and dominion over the salvation of our friends?
No.
Well, he didn't say that their friends were saved. It just says that God didn't punish them, because also another thing his friends were doing, he was saying that God was punishing Job directly. And that's within itself is technically blasphemy. Saying that all these things are happening because of God, or evil things are happening because of God. And if it's not true, then that's blasphemy. And because technically he was using Satan to attack Job. It wasn't God himself. Because there are times where God himself...
Nah, but if I use her and tell her to slap you, then I do the thing, So if God's using Satan to do bad things to you, then it's like, then that's God.
No, it's not God himself, because then it wouldn't make sense in the story as to why God wanted to punish his friends.
Bro, if I give her a gun and say shoot you, and she shoots you, that's because me.
No, because at the end I had the choice to do it or not. You encouraged me.
No, and then at the end of the day, you also have to see that it was actually Satan's whole idea too.
Yeah, that's true. So you came to me like, oh, should I shoot him? And I'm like, oh, okay, understandable.
So it's like if Brittany were to come to you, like, well, I'm gonna shoot this guy, I'm gonna kill this guy, and you're like, no, you can't kill him. That's basically what happened. And then you're like, oh, go try it, but you won't be able to kill him.
Shoot his leg only.
Yeah, you're like, you won't be able to kill him. Or, I guess I'm using the wrong example here. So she's like, well, I bet I can knock this guy out. And you're like, oh, but you can't knock him out.
Yeah.
So and he's like, and you're like, go ahead, try it. but you're not going to be able to knock them out. That's basically what happened with Job, where he was like if I do all of these things, Job is going to stop offering those sacrifices to you, And then, that's basically how the whole story of Job started, because Satan presented himself and he's like, oh, he's going to stop sacrificing to you if I do this. But yeah, there are times where God doesn't get involved, and I feel like that's much worse, once it's God himself punishing you.
Yeah.
Once it's God himself, because there are some things like the story of Jonah, for example, like that was God himself, like kind of pushing Jonah to preach to the people of Nineveh. Because in Jonah, God told him to preach to a certain group of people.
Yeah.
And Jonah just didn't want to do that. He just went the other way and went on a boat. He just left. He just booked it. But it was kind of God who, there was a storm on the boat, and then he got swallowed by a big fish. And so those were all from God, because he wanted him to preach.
Yeah.
So God was basically telling them, like, hey, no, you're going to preach. No matter what you're going to do, you're going to preach. You're going to preach to those people. Mm-hmm.
I think it's crazy that Jonah wanted those people to die. That although they got saved and everybody repented, and yet he still wanted everybody to die.
Yeah, Jonah, even he said so himself. I think in the last chapter, he just says, yeah, I already knew you were going to do this. That you were going to have mercy on them. That's why you didn't want to go, So
even in the Old Testament, God shows mercy.
Yes, so he does show mercy even in the Old Testament. Yes, but I feel like it was because they repented of their sins.
Mm-hmm.
While Sodom and Gomorrah, that was a whole different situation, because there was no righteous people at all. The only people righteous were just Abraham and his family. And then that's where God, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the story, but he basically asked them, hey, find me 10 people who are righteous.
Yeah.
Or it started off with a bigger number, but slowly it dwindled down all the way to just one, and Abraham couldn't find anyone, because God was like, even God then had mercy on him. Yeah. Had mercy on that city. He's like, all right, find me one righteous person, and I won't destroy it. But no, there is no one righteous. And so even God then, he tried showing his mercy to that city. Yeah. But no, there is no one righteous.
I feel like our faith would have been a lot different if Adam and Eve repented.
Of course. I mean, that would have changed that's like the very beginning of the book. It would have changed everything. Literally would have changed everything. But they would have never repented.
Do you think it's because they didn't know how? Because they were just so new to everything.
That's an interesting point. I don't know.
No, I think they did know how. Because the same way you're able to blame somebody else is because you know what you did was bad.
No, but look, if a kid does something bad, you tell them, hey, that's not good, say sorry. But they didn't have that. Thing was all new to them. Their feelings were new. No one guided them.
Well, yes. No, they knew what they did was bad, right? Do we agree on this? They hid, and they hid. They were hiding from God. And God was like, where are you guys? They still remained hidden. That was him giving them the opportunity to be like, hey, we ate the apple, sorry. But what did they choose to do? They chose to continue to hide and feel guilty.
But this is the first time shame was introduced to them, though. Shame was introduced to them, and when you even mentioned it before in middle school, this is the first time you feel these things, and this is the first time they felt shame and they didn't know how to cope with it.
I just think God is just, and yeah. That's an interesting thing to think about, really, because I personally have never thought about that. Yeah. But yeah, it's just something good to think about.
But then that question also, then you could ask, what if they never ate the apple? And it's like, okay, now we're just going
Well, but it's like everybody says that God is the good father, but how come he didn't correct them? Instead, he just banished them.
If we're going on the perception of everything was new, this was God's first experience with children.
No, I think it goes much deeper than that. Yes. I just think because, what was your repeat your question? Or repeat your statement?
I don't even remember my statement.
If he's a good father, why didn't he teach them? Why did he just banish them?
Oh, I just think that because he's a just and holy God, and since they ate the apple, they were already introduced to sin. Technically, they disobeyed, so that was the first sin that they did. So that's where, as soon as they disobeyed, that's where everything went wrong there. Mm-hmm. Because they did exactly what Satan did. He got them out of heaven. And I feel like that's what God did with them too. That they're like, hey, you guys aren't holy anymore because he disobeyed, And so he just kicked them out. I think that's what happened there. Yeah, it's just an interesting story. The book itself too, whole book of Genesis is really interesting because you could also ask, well, why was the serpent there? In the first place. And I think I already touched the subject a little bit with you.
Yeah, so in the book of Isaiah, it talks about Satan falling. We said that since he fell from the sky, he maybe turned into like a serpent and he was just in the garden.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think that's one theory that people say is that Satan and his followers, they got sent down, they got struck down, and that's basically why God kind of made the earth so he could contain them. And that's why he made humans too, so we could have control over the animals, but also to those demons too, so we could have control over them. Because it's also a slap in the face to them too, because it's like these human beings technically not superior than you, because they're fallen angels. They're technically superior to us, We're just humans, but that's also a slap in the face to them because they're like these things that are not superior to you have power over you. So it's kind of God showing them like, hey, because I made them and because they're following me.
We just mentioned that Eden was a holy place. Satan and his demons are not holy, so how were they able to get inside?
That's actually a good point. You know what? Then scratch what I said before. Eden was not a holy place. I just think the whole thing that happened there, why they got kicked out, is I just think that it has something to do with God's presence and maybe them being disobedient as to why God went to such an extreme that's punishing Adam and Eve, But yeah, it's or what was your question? I'm sorry. Or I have no idea if that answered your question.
Yeah, it kind of did. We mentioned that Eden wasn't a holy place anymore.
Well, in the Bible, it doesn't say it was a holy place. It just says it was a garden. So Genesis 1, he created the earth. Genesis 2, Adam and Eve, it was just he placed them in the Garden of Eden. And then Genesis 3, we see the serpent.
Isn't it crazy that God never warned them about the serpent and how they were liars and that they might deceive them?
No, because if you have one instruction, don't touch the box, and everyone's telling you touch the box, then you're gonna be like, man, you tripping. I was told not to touch the box because you don't need any more rules besides don't touch the box. Everything else that goes against it, don't do it.
I guess you're right.
Yeah, that's true too. That's a very valid point, because if you're given one order and that's the only order, it's like, why not follow it,
Yeah.
And God even warned them, like, you're gonna die if you eat from that apple. So it's like, why not follow it even more? Like if someone tells you, oh, you're gonna get
women wasn't there. That's why Eve fell.
Also, Adam had to be there to be like, hey, don't listen to the talking gecko over there.
Talking gecko.
No, Erica had a good point. She told me that it wasn't just a one-time thing, that the serpent was talking to her, like getting a connection with her, like sitting that friendship. And then that's when the serpent was like,
damn woman.
So women.
No, Adam has to be there to oversee everything because he was the one in charge of the whole garden.
Yeah, no, you're right. He was in charge of the whole garden.
Yeah, I just think it was a mixture of both, really. Like they're both in the wrong, And the fact that Eve took the apple and she ate it, and the fact that Adam wasn't there, that he also took the apple, or the fruit.
He was aware it was bad and he still followed through. That's a big thing for me. When God told him, like, yo, what happened? He was like, she gave me the fruit and I ate it. Like,
oh yeah, and also something to think about too is that that fruit didn't affect them until Adam took a bite out of it. Because when Eve took a bite out of it, nothing happened until Adam took a bite out of it.
Hey, yo.
AKA the house, or he was the leader or the head of that, of everything. But so nothing was affected until it got to the leader. That's something to think about too.
Whoa. That's crazy. I would always think about like, oh, maybe Eve was, sometimes she likes to share fruit, and Adam didn't know it was the fruit of from the tree that they were not allowed to eat. So maybe Eve deceived Adam, and Adam wasn't even aware, and he just ate it by accident. Because the story is so vague.
Yeah, it is.
But he did specifically say, oh, she gave me the fruit and I ate it.
Yeah, but maybe it was just like a regular apple, and it wasn't from the tree of wisdom.
Not, but he specifically said though, like, she gave me the fruit from the tree of wisdom, so he knew.
I don't think so.
I hope so. If not, I'm like a goober. Yes, it's the woman you gave to be with me. She gave me some fruit from the tree and I ate it. And before this, God had asked him, did you eat from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from? So he was aware.
Maybe he was aware because he felt different.
Possibly. But then we're just kind of like...
Yeah, now we're just, yeah.
Yeah, because it could have been the case where the woman ate it too, and she saw nothing happen, so she's like, I guess it's fine to eat. So she gave some to Adam, and then Adam ate it, and then that's where... Yeah, because that was something interesting that I heard. I think it was from a preacher or someone, but that was something interesting that I found out was like, you know what, they're right. Like when Eve ate it, like nothing happened, or else she would have known that she was naked. It wasn't until Adam ate, and then they both realized that they were naked.
If they're naked and they're the only people here, who are they hiding from?
Oh, that's because they were hiding from God. But in a way, I think your next question is, but I thought you can't hide from God. I think
that was my next question.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Well, I think that's a whole separate section, because that's interesting though.
Well, thank you, Frankie, for joining us to our podcast. I feel like it was very successful and we touched a lot of topics. They're very interesting and hopefully you guys learned something as well. We'll go ahead and see you next time.
I had a lot of fun. Shoot us over some of your most recommended Christian Jesus theologians so we can learn more as well.
Okay. Yeah, of course. And then I guess if anyone wants like some sources or some videos too, like I could also provide those too. Like some of the ideas that I came up with, they were from like either videos on YouTube or like the whole Job one. That was from like a kind of like a mini documentary on YouTube. So I could probably share that with you guys too if you guys want to look more into it. Yeah. But yeah, thank you for having me, and it's been an honor, man. So thank you.
Okay, bye guys.